A very good morning to everyone, a very warm welcome to the webinar today. This is part of our 6th series of webinars and the sessions in the NERC Constructing a Digital Environment program. And details of our other earlier webinars are all online on our Constructing a Digital Environment website and our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/@NERC Digital Environment, one word. You can find the link on our website. So I'm Steve Hallett. I'm one of the UKRI Digital Environment Champions within the Constructing a Digital Environment program. And this is all about supporting the development and application of digital approaches in environmental science. And in this series, we'll focus in turn on each of the CDE Demonstrator projects supported by NERC, and today is SENSUM. And this is particularly important as we are living in a complex world with natural and human worlds intersecting to such an extent there's now possibly no parts of the planet where human influence is not felt in some way. And the patterns of changes influence and impact in profound ways, with issues like population growth, the migration of humans to the cities, the consequences of the changing climate on life, the relationship between ice shelves, oceans and atmosphere, the loss of biodiversity, and the changes affecting land and its capacity to support ecosystems. And these are all issues that were recently discussed at COP27 and at the forthcoming COP15 Biodiversity Conference in Montreal at the United Nations. So this web of interconnectivity makes it really very hard, if not practically impossible, for any person to fully embrace, and comprehend and act on all these complexities. And so scientists seeking to understand the world around us, trying to identify the causes of environmental change and consider potential options for the future and find ways to advance society, must develop appropriate tools to aid their work. And so the discussion in this webinar series is all about the digital environment. And so this is an approach describing how we can represent the world in digital form, both methodologically and philosophically, developing a digitally enabled environment, able to benefit scientists, policymakers, businesses, communities, and individuals, and inform our understanding of how these complexities impact on our lives and society. And we draw on an arc of technologies, and this arc goes from the creation of integrated networks of environmental sensors, in situ, remote sensing based, the means to access the vast bodies of consequent data, and the methods and digital tools for assessing, analyzing, monitoring, forecasting, and ultimately presenting the state of the natural environment. And these approaches need inputs from across the disciplines. It's one of the fascinating things about these projects. Multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research and innovation, or MIDRI, as NERC phrased it, converging the fields of environmental science, computer science, data science, engineering, economics, decision and social science to allow the construction of a digital environment. And the tools help us then to respond to acute events, but also inform our understanding of long-term environmental change. So to address these issues and to draw on a wealth of examples, I'm very pleased to welcome the SENSUM project team. And SENSUM are developing new integrated ways to tackle hydrogeological landslides and flood hazards, taking advantage of advances in wireless sensor networks and the Internet of Things, microelectronics and machine learning. So I'd like to welcome the panel members. First of all, Dr. Georgie Bennett. You're all most welcome from the University of Exeter. Georgie is a senior lecturer in geography at Exeter and the PI of SENSUM, and her research is on the response of landslides to climate and tectonics and cascading landslide hazards. Dr. Irene Manzella from the University of Twente. Dr. Manzella is head and coordinator of the Centre for Disaster Resilience and associate professor in geotechnical engineering for natural hazard risk management at Twente. And Dr. Aldina Franco from UEA, associate professor in the School of Environmental Sciences. And her research focuses on the response of biodiversity to anthropogenic change, including land use and climate change. And Dr. Kyle Roskilly from Exeter, the University of Exeter, who's a part-time project manager on SENSUM postdoc research fellow based at Exeter, trained and worked in aerospace engineering, and later as a software engineer specializing in GNSS and inertial sensors. So we're going to have a good discussion now, which will be preceded by Georgie giving us an overview of the project. At any given time to the audience, please pop your questions in the Q&A box that you'll see in the Zoom, and I'll try and pick up on as many of these as we have a good discussion. But Georgie, if I may, perhaps I could turn to you first and ask if you could tell us a bit about the SENSUM project and give us some background and context to it.
Yeah, I think I will share my slides to do this. Okay, hopefully everyone can see those. Yep. Great. So I'm going to be telling you about SENSUM. Thanks very much, Stephen, for the introduction. And then I'm really looking forward to the discussion between the panel members, myself, Aldina Franco, Irene Manzella and Kyle Roskilly, and everyone in the audience. So this project started back in October 2020, and we're currently in a year no-cost extension period until the end of next September. It's led by the University of Exeter, but in close partnership with the universities of Plymouth, where Irene was formerly based, and the University of East Anglia, where Aldina is based. And we're really proud to have a highly international and interdisciplinary team on this project, and close partnerships with several project partners in the UK and abroad. Just trying to change the slide. There we go. As Stephen said, we're addressing landslide and flood hazards that have a major impact both in the UK and globally. And we aim to develop innovative tools for monitoring and early warning, eventually early warning, this is a long-term goal, of landslides and floods. The innovative element is that we are using sensors, wireless sensors that are actually embedded within boulder and woody debris. SENSUM builds on a previous project, Boulder, which I led whilst still at the University of East Anglia, together with Aldina. And we showed in a kind of pilot study with a previous version of the sensor that we're using in SENSUM, that these sensors embedded within boulders could successfully tell us about the timing of movement across the landslide body on a landslide in the pool. And you can read more about this research in this publication by our former postdoc, Benedetta Dini. SENSUM kind of continues this approach, and we also tag woody debris in woody debris dams, which are a measure increasingly used as part of natural flood management in the UK and elsewhere. And these tags initially came from Aldina's work tracking wildlife, mostly birds. So using these sensors to detect different behaviors of these birds. So there's kind of a long history over the last kind of several years of the development of these sensors that we use on SENSUM and have continued to develop. And having sensors embedded in boulder and woody debris really allows us to track kind of the movement of the underlying hazard, the landslide or the flood, and also detect kind of the propagation of these hazards downslope or downstream. So the part of SENSUM that I lead is the field component, together with Kyle Roskilly. And we've had another postdoc who recently finished on this part of the project, and a technician. So Martina Egadusovic was our postdoc and Robin Curtis was our technician, and they were central to this component of the project as well. So we've established 8 wireless sensor networks in the UK, France and Nepal. These basically work in this schematic, part of Benedetta Dini's paper on the previous slide. So we have sensors embedded, in this case, in boulders that activate on movement. So the accelerometer kind of, once it once the sensor is tilted, for example, due to an underlying movement of the landslide, it records at a higher rate, and it sends data on the movement of the boulder to a gateway, in this case on the opposite side of the valley, via long-range wide area network communication, basically radio waves. And this gateway then sends the data up to a server via the GSM network, where we can access it on our computers. In the case of coastal sites that we have, Lyme Regis and the Isle of Wight, and several woody debris sites, including Yarner Woods on Dartmoor, Pennell in Wales, Sepra and Tivay in Cumbria, the placement of the gateway can often be a bit more challenging than we had in Nepal. We don't have a kind of convenient site just on the opposite side of the valley with perfect line of sight. So this has caused kind of some challenges in various sites that we'll discuss more later. This is just a picture up here of the sensor attached to a battery in its specially designed casing, and a slide cube designed by our technician Robin, where we were lacking natural boulders, and these actually have several advantages. They can be prepared before going on site. You can see the little resin seal concealing the sensor that goes down into this basically breeze block cube that's then placed on the surface of the landslide. This is just some nice visuals of one of our SENSUM wireless sensor networks at Compton Cliffs on the southwestern end of the Isle of Wight. Here you can see some nice drone imagery and 19 of our sensors across this landslide complex. The slide cubes in preparation on top of the cliffs here, and a gateway installed across the bay at the Freshwater Hotel. We've had kind of several challenges in sort of communications and firmware development with sensors that have kind of occupied a lot of our time and resources on the field side of the project over the last couple of years. But I'm happy to say that every one of the 8 wireless sensor networks is now up and running, collecting data, and now our challenge is to kind of unpack that and analyze that data, which we're going to be doing in the months moving forwards. We do have some data from these smart cobbles, which my PhD student, mine and Aldina's PhD student, Miles Clark, has been developing as part of his PhD, but also as a graduate research assistant on SENSUM. You can see one of these concrete smart cobbles modeled on a typical kind of bedload size cobble here. And I just wanted to highlight some exciting results that Miles has been getting from his project looking at fluvial bedload transport in rivers, wood-loaded rivers. And he's managed to obtain what we believe to be the first detection of fluvial bedload transport kind of entrainment into the flow with inertial measurement unit sensors by long-range wireless area network communications at our Yarner Woods wireless sensor network site. And the figure on the right here is just showing the 3 strands of data he obtains from the sensor embedded in his cobble, the accelerometer data, gyroscope and magnetometer data that we think shows transition from sort of sliding, rolling in the bed to actual kind of saltation or kind of hopping along the bed. So this is work in progress in Miles's PhD thesis. And these cobbles have been central also to the laboratory experiments, which I'll show in the next few slides. So this part of the project is led by Irene Manzella and her postdoc Alessandro Scarabotto. Alison Raby has also been central to this work. And here you're seeing just some results. Alessandro's got a lot of exciting results that I don't have time to show you, but this is an example of a dry granular flow experiment. And they've been able to differentiate between rolling and bouncing behavior, shown in green here, and sliding behavior, shown in red. And this type of laboratory experimentation and characterization of different modes of movement will be critical for interpretation of the field data that we're starting to collect, and ultimately sort of design of alerts for hazardous movement and so forth moving forwards. Another set of laboratory experiments has been on woody debris dam stability and debris movement. and I don't have time to show you results, but there are exciting results from this part. And here are just some nice visuals of the experiments of woody debris, dam stability and woody debris movement. And Plymouth are also leading a package on visualization and ultimately risk communication of our SENSUM results. And this is just an example of a simulation of a collapse of a debris dam that they've run in collaboration with the University of Manchester. Over the next few months, the remainder of the project and beyond, we're going to be working towards hazard early warning. We're going to be using machine learning to characterize wood and boulder movement from field and laboratory data sets. We have a PhD student starting at Exeter early next year to help with this effort. And Kyle has already started to design a web interface with which to visualize movement and provide alerts of hazardous movement to stakeholders based on some of our machine learning work. So I just wanted to kind of show the whole team. Thanks to everyone for their hard work over the last 2 years and kind of ongoing work on this. And just to highlight my panel members here, Aldina Franco, Irene Manzella and Kyle Roskilly. I'm not sure that I need to introduce them again because Stephen introduced them so nicely. And I think I've mentioned their involvement in the project in this work, but yeah, Aldina Franco is a co-investigator on the project based at UEA, an associate professor in the School of Environmental Sciences there. Irene Manzella is now at the University of Twente and head of the Centre for Disaster Resilience, as well as an associate professor in geotechnical engineering, and was formerly at Plymouth and leads the Plymouth team and 2 of the work packages on the SENSUM project. And Kyle Roskilly is an ongoing postdoctoral research fellow, project manager, and has been the software engineer that's been kind of central for setting up these wireless sensor networks in the field and brainstorming all sorts of sort of challenges we've had in that arena, which we'll go on to discuss next, I'm sure. So I will stop sharing.
That's great. Oh, that's super. Thanks. Well, I mean, the first thing to say is it's a big team, isn't it? You've got working on the project, and I think that's interesting. We're bringing together lots of different skills, and I think that's something we can come back and look at for dealing with these environmental challenges like this. You do need that breadth of experience and knowledge to come in. I mean, let's start off. Just be interested really to try and characterize the challenge that you're facing and the extent to which this really impacts on society. You're dealing with a flooding and debris flow. These are big issues worldwide, big issues in the UK. I'm familiar with some of the problems on the Isle of Wight, for example. But maybe you could start by just capturing what is it about these challenges that have led you to develop this?
Yeah, so sorry, I was just looking in the chat as well. Well, we're addressing landslide and flood hazards. I think, yeah, these landslides sort of have big impacts in the UK and globally, and potentially kind of increasing impacts under climate change. In my research, I'm particularly interested in cascading landslide hazards and interaction with floods. Irina is interested in sort of granular flow dynamics and sort of mass flows and propagation of those. These types of sensors really enable us to kind of start to get at some of those cascading processes and the physics of those flows a bit better, because they're really embedded within the flow, within the grains, the individual grains kind of within the flows themselves. So that's kind of one part of it, which Irina, as a kind of expert in the physics of these flows, can talk more to. Then just from the early warning perspective of kind of hoping to give kind of warnings of hazardous movement, I think, yeah, the fact that these are also kind of moving with the surface of the flow, and we don't need to kind of go and fix fix them if there is kind of movement. They can kind of continue to monitor flow as the flow moves down, and give, hopefully kind of useful alerts once we can kind of detect what might be.
You actually have your sensors embedded in the landslide as it proceeds down the slope. So that's something you don't have to, because presumably once these things start, they can be quite dangerous, and actually it's quite hazardous even sighting the sensors in the first place, I expect. So
right. I don't know if Aldina or Irene more likely wants to add onto what I've just said in terms of kind of that.
Well, let's turn to Irene then. Irene, what would you add to that, and the challenge?
The challenges are quite a lot, in the sense that we are in quite an explored path there. So the use of this sensor, they have a lot of advantages in the sense that they are cheap, and they are, as Georgie was saying, they are embedded in the movement and in the process itself. So they can give very valuable and unprecedented insight on the movement itself, on the process, the dynamics, and also, in terms of early warning system, they can give us real-time information about this movement. But the challenges are there because we are exploring how this sensor can be reliable. So how the data from this sensor can be reliable, and how we can connect them to the information that we want as well. So there is a lot, and this is why this project is also so important, and also it is great, and it has been great to work with this interdisciplinary team as well, because we can combine all the knowledge and expertise about the sensor, how they communicate with the gateway, with the amazing expertise of Kyle, and the experience of Aldina, and in other contexts, with our knowledge, so from Georgie and me on this process. And it's still a work in progress, because we really need to assess the reliability of this sensor. But
you're nudging the work along a sort of technology readiness level trajectory, I guess. And I'm just interested in where you think things are at the moment, and perhaps what the opportunities are to expand the approaches in the future as well.
I mean, as I was saying, having this, so the opportunities, the expanding opportunities are along with the kind of development that we have in Internet of Things, and as well in the computational capacity, in developing also filters that can enable us to convert the data that we have from the sensor in valuable and reliable data, as I was saying before. So there are some parallel development that are going on in the different fields. But as I was saying before, these insight data really give us a new point of view on these different processes. Can really be inside of a landslide or a debris being transported, and having this information straight away is something that hasn't been done before. So it's kind of, the opportunity are really huge.
Absolutely. The opportunity is huge. It's just interesting to see where what the opportunities are to develop in the future. I'm just wondering, Aldina, if I might bring you in as well. We've spoken about digital environment in my introduction, and the use of digital techniques and so on. What is it about digital that do you think really helps address the sorts of challenges that SENSUM is trying to focus on? And where does digital environment sit in your thinking?
Yeah. So I started working with these devices a long time ago, trying to follow animal movement. And my research is trying to understand how biodiversity responds to global environmental change. So what I wanted to know was why birds are stopping migrating, and are there links with climate change? And I started using devices that have GPS and enable us to understand the movement of the birds. And then I incorporated the accelerometer information, and the accelerometer enables us to understand what the bird is doing at each point we collect the data. And then Georgie and I started discussing how could you use these devices for tracking big boulders on a landslide, for instance, when they roll under the monsoon rains. And we thought they would be potentially useful. And that's how we started thinking about digital environment. And the whole idea was, can we create alert systems for populations that when these big boulders start moving, then there's an alert system that can be sent to populations further downstream. So that was, if you like, the end point of the research. And the digital environment, if you like, these multiple sensors that we can deploy in landscapes that are mobile really enable us to do these kinds of things. And I'm fascinated with what Georgie and Irene's research is about, with the fact that we can monitor precipitation, we can monitor the flow in rivers, and then understand how these environmental factors then change the landscape. And then we can embed our sensors in the landscape and understand the links between the environmental factors and what happens on land with boulders, landslides, or wood or cobbles in rivers. So I think there's a lot of potential. We are just at the start of it. That's my view. And you probably noticed from Georgie's presentation that not only we have the accelerometer and the GPS, we now also use the 3-sensor sensor that has a gyroscope and a magnetometer. And that provides even more insight into the detailed movement of the different objects in the landscape.
Yeah, I think it increases by an order of magnitude the challenge in terms of interpreting the data as well. But that's
definitely the PhD students are stretched.
I'm fascinated by the evolution of the technology. I mean, you mentioned the biodiversity applications, and I myself was involved in tracking elephants with radio collars and seeing where they went and so on. And it's really interesting to see how you've used that approach and applied it in effectively quite a different way. But it's that journey is clear, I think, in the evolution of this.
Yes.
I mean, it'd be interesting. Maybe Kyle, if I might bring you in as well. Just interested in how these approaches, we can see that sort of evolution of approaches, but how do you think these sorts of methods could be expanded, do you think, Kyle, and applied in other contexts? Do you think there's other sort of geographical areas or other thematic areas where we could use these sorts of approaches?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we've talked about, the motion tracking technology was originally used in Aldina's research in movement ecology of birds. So this project, in some sense, is a kind of expansion of that, and builds on some of my past work in other fields as well. But certainly, these are issues that are relevant in locations all over the world. So certainly, geographically, it could be expanded. In technical terms, there might be things to consider, like the legality of using radio systems in different territories and availability of mobile data networks and things like that. Thematically, there are obviously all kinds of applications in motion tracking technology, but I suppose some of the most immediately applicable ones that we've had discussions about are potentially monitoring things like glide snow avalanches, which is something we've discussed with Swiss scientists. Mine tailings monitoring is something we've also discussed. Cliff collapse and rock fall monitoring and warnings is something we've had discussions with the National Trust about. And something I've also worked on in the past was development of open LoRaWAN networks, which are sort of aimed at environmental monitoring. The project I was working on was focused on creating a network for Cornwall. But I think creating big networks like that would really open up communications for all kinds of sensors, so not just ours, but across lots of different fields. And I think some of the work we've done in developing our gateways to suit different installation constraints and maximize the coverage, communication coverage, would really help in those sort of areas.
That's fascinating. Actually, that segues quite nicely into one of the questions, Kyle, that we've just had from the audience. And thanks, Jonathan Evans, for this. Who's just asking, what are the key technical challenges that you had really in deploying LoRaWAN? And Jonathan asked, would you be able to provide any sort of lessons learned in terms of informing similar deployments for flood and drought research infrastructure?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think there were probably two main challenges we had, which were the communication and making the sensors robust to the environment. I think in terms of making the sensors robust, what was really a step forward for us was making a 3D printed enclosure to give the environmental protection we need, and also allowing reusability of the sensors rather than one-time use. Now, we've still got some challenges with that, but because something we found with 3D prints is that they can still be porous once they've been printed. And there seems to be variability in that as well. So some let in a lot of water, some let in only a small amount. So, for example, adding waterproof sprays on the outside of those enclosures really helped with that. In terms of the communication, we had a quite serious firmware bug that was a problem for us, but thankfully we identified that as quickly as possible and had the manufacturer replicate that and provide a fix for it. But we've also had issues generally with communication on some sites just due to the challenging signal environment. So trees and rocks and water, all kinds of things like that, really provide a challenge. So we had to be quite innovative in the way we positioned our gateway and had some kind people to host them for us, and developing the gateways away from what was just available off the shelf. But sometimes the only answer really was just to resort to moving the sensors into slightly better positions where they would work.
Try it and see.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Georgie, I think there's this question here. Hugh Sinclair, thank you for your question. I'm just asking whether you foresee a time when smart pebbles could be placed actually in bigger rivers to improve an understanding of larger scale bedload motion. And what about changes in river capacity and flooding? So Hugh asks whether it's likely that the burial or loss of these sensors is a real limitation at all.
Yeah, so this is kind of not part of the original SENSUM objectives to look at bedload transport. It's sort of part of Miles Clark's PhD work, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the results that Miles has got from Yana Woods. We can already tell that those smart cobbles are not sending data anymore, probably because the discharge is high enough that it's covering those cobbles and they're not able to communicate through water. So in that system, it's a small river. Cobbles do get exposed during dry periods, and then they can send their data via LoRa. Miles has also kind of retrieved cobbles from another site up in Cumbria manually and sort of downloaded the data via cable download. So that's also possible. And he has an RFID tag that helps him to kind of relocate where those sensors are. So yeah, but then you need wadability of the river to actually go and be able to retrieve those sensors. So yeah, in terms of kind of Hugh's question, it's a really good question. I'm excited to see, I'd love to get some more funding to kind of work on this component and put more cobbles in sort of other rivers and see kind of what the limitations are and so on. I suspect that like if cobbles do get sort of deposited often enough kind of on gravel bars that they're above water able to send data, then it might be possible in kind of bigger rivers. We'll see.
Presumably the propagation of the radio signal up through the water will be a bit of a challenge, I would imagine. So. Yeah,
Alessandro in the lab at Plymouth has been conducting some experiments on how the signal quality declines very quickly underwater.
You mentioned the receivers on the other side of the valley. I think that might be a bit ambitious. Let's turn, if we may, to actually to the technology a bit more, because I think people will be very interested to just to have a feeling for the range of different technologies, and perhaps Georgie or Aldina might like to reflect on the arc of technologies that I outlined, the sort of the sensors, the data. How have you adopted and used and built on that arc of technologies in SENSUM?
Okay, so if I start,
yeah, thank you.
So when I started using sensors to understand animal movement, I really wanted GPS and accelerometer, because those would give me the information I needed to understand whether the animal was active and how it was moving. And we started with relatively big sensors that would send the data directly via the mobile phone network. So these were bigger devices, and one of the challenges when we monitor animal movement is that we can't deploy devices that are more than 3% of the weight of the animal, which is not an issue for an elephant, but it's definitely an issue for the small birds that I want to track. So there are several small birds that are changing their migratory behavior, and I wanted to have devices that would be lightweight, meaning 3 to 5 grams in weight, including battery, solar panels. You can see that it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So we started working with a new company that provided the smallest module, and the data transmission was different. So rather than being mobile phone GSM that require more energy, we started working with smaller devices, and the LoRaWAN technology seemed a very good technology to enable us to miniaturize the device and use small batteries. So that's how it all started in terms of the development of the sensors. And then as we progressed with the Boulder project and into the SENSUM project, we knew that the 3-sensor sensor with magnetometer and gyroscope sensors were available, and they only needed to be activated, and we could collect more information, not only on the acceleration of the device, but also on how it rotates, which was really important for sensing.
So these sort of integrated sort of one sensor that does all of these things now. I guess that's something that's changing as well. You can get these sensors that are multifunctional, low cost, cheapest chips.
Yes, exactly. I think that definitely was a big advance. And the company we work with in Switzerland provided these miniature devices already with those multiple sensors. And we also, for the birds, we are also interested in a barometer and in the thermometer to record temperature and pressure on board. So these devices can be quite small and include all these different sensors that enable us to collect multiple information for different applications.
Thank you. And Kyle, just thinking back to some of the points that you'd made earlier, there's a question here from Louise Derrick. Thanks, Louise. Just asking really about issues with maintaining sense of power and ensuring the sort of data integrity that's that you have. And I'm just interested, how long does the power last for at the smart levels as well?
Yeah, well, it's obviously it depends what size of battery we use. So we have 3 different sizes of enclosure that we use. So on the landslide sites, we're using a primary lithium cell, the same size as a D cell. We also have a C cell size enclosure and a AA size enclosure. But it's assessing the battery life is quite difficult because it does depend on the activity of the sensor. So the more motion it experiences, obviously the more power it uses because there's more data to be transmitted. But for the biggest size enclosure, we are anticipating battery lives are around a year, which is good because it means that we can access those really challenging sites in safer times of year, but then capture the data during the more dangerous times. And then in terms of the data integrity and security, that's all kind of taken care of by the LoRaWAN protocol, really. We don't really have to worry about that too much. It's all secured by security keys and ensures that the data isn't lost in transmission and is error checked and that kind of thing. Yeah,
that's a challenge, all right? But that's interesting. There's a good lot of discussion on the Q&A, which relates to that. And thank you for the comments coming in there. Irina and Georgie, really, when you're putting sensors out there, and inevitably you start to interact with the people. I mean, you showed this picture of the device set up on the hotel, for example, in the Isle of Wight. So I'm just wondering what you learned about involving the public and stakeholders in this sort of activity when you in these technical approaches. So Irina or Georgie, or question for
Irina?
Yeah. If I can start, I mean, it's for us it was really important from the start. So we had also the involvement of as well Ian Stewart. So Professor Ian Stewart from the University of Plymouth now is in the Royal Scientific Society in Jordan, who is an expert also in communication and policy, the interface in between policy and science as well. Because for us in this project, it was always one of the first objective was to be grounded and connected with stakeholder and policymakers, because we cannot do, and so we wouldn't be able to do anything that we have done apart from the laboratory experiment if we didn't involve them, because, and from the start, the first workshop that we had, we involved them not only in information, so not only giving information about what we wanted to do, but also trying to understand their needs in terms of what would be the best, so what do you need to know about different catchments, river, different landslide, and then we had very interesting information from them, like for example for this dam, this woody dam in river came also with this interaction, came from this interaction with the stakeholders, that they said that we really need to know how the stability of this structure is, and how we can detect and connect that. And the same was for, like, for example, lime ridges. We collaborated with the municipality really closely with the municipality to have an idea where there were the movements and where the critical areas. So we went with the representative of the municipality on site with Kyle and Alessandro and Martina and Robin. We went and Georgie, we went around and looked where were the sites that were critical. So the involvement and the communication was not only for information, but was really to set where were the problems and how we can solve it together, and how this new technology can be beneficial for them and for the community, because at the end is not only, I am personally interested in the process, the dynamic, the mechanics. So this also the laboratory experiments are really useful for that, and the sensors are really useful for that. But then the ultimate goal is really to improve the hazard assessment, and so to improve the resilience of the community. So we need to keep this dialogue open, and even if we are at early stage in trying to test and validate this sensor, it's already important to have this communication.
I mean, this is the interdisciplinary nature of what you're doing, isn't it? I mean, you hear lots about things like rewilding landscapes and the introduction of species like beavers and things, and colleagues who are thinking about things like that might actually like to know the physics of what's going on the rivers. And so you can see that these technologies could be feeding into an understanding of quite diverse range of issues, hazards and biodiversity issues as well.
Yeah, and also, that it's also a very important part. So one of the work package is actually for communication and trying to visualize what we can learn from this sensor with simulation. And this we have in Plymouth, there is this immersive vision theater where we can try and see if this kind of immersive video can enhance the awareness, but also the perception that people have of these different phenomena. So we are really, it was one of the core objective of the project. So it's just to maintain this connection with the community and trying to understand their needs before even starting to work, you know.
Okay, well, thanks for that. And just looking at the Q&A, and again, thanks for that. And Georgie, just a comment really from Natural Resource Wales. Thank you, Heather Mitchell, for posting this. Just a comment really about the value really of these sorts of technical approaches and helping organisations like Natural Resource Wales and Forest Research understand the impact and effectiveness of natural flood mitigation measures that are being put in place both now and planning for the future. So Georgie, you know, that's great to hear that. And what sort of levels of activity have there been with key stakeholders in outreach of your research and really that sort of translational piece of bringing this technology to bear on real world problems that stakeholders are facing?
Yeah, I mean, Irene gave a really nice sort of answer to the question before. But for every site, it's been really important to engage with the kind of relevant land managers, whether that's Natural England in Yarna Woods, whether that's kind of private landowners up in Cumbria, that the Environment Agency helped us to kind of correspond with and allow us to put sensors on their land, or Martina Egadusevic, former postdoc on the sort of woody debris side of the field network setup. She did a great job of kind of connecting with all sorts of new stakeholders, all of whom were sort of sent the invite for this webinar today. So good to know that some Natural Resources Wales people are here. Thank you. But yeah, she found this great kind of catchment partnership in Pennell in North Wales. And yeah, that brought together all sorts of sort of different users of the land and stakeholders who showed sort of great interest and support for the work. We were able to tie into an existing gateway in that catchment, looking at sort of rainfall and discharge in the river. So our sensors are sort of communicating with that gateway. So an awful lot of interaction, as Irina says, for the woody debris dam sort of tracking side of the project. That was all based on sort of discussions with the Environment Agency and a few stakeholders whilst at the sort of proposal writing stage to actually identify that as a kind of key application of the SENSUM project. But as we've heard, there are many more.
So right from the start, you were reaching out and trying to make those connections. Yeah.
I mean, we've kept everyone sort of, especially in kind of key catchments that we're working in, updated. Martina has sort of led authorship of some reports. Whenever we go in the field and do some more work, we kind of report on what we've done with just a written report that's emailed around. We will eventually have a sort of big wrap-up workshop of sort of where we've got, and hopefully we'll have some exciting data to show on woody debris movement and sort of boulder movement from the field by sort of next summer, that we can kind of learn a bit more from in terms of sort of maybe advising on design of woody debris dams. That's kind of one of the aims of the project, is to be able to kind of assess stability of different styles of woody debris dams and help with the policy behind those. So yeah, I mean, as we've touched on a little bit, there's a lot involved in this technology that was, you know, challenging, especially in COVID times. I was on maternity leave for 6 months. Luckily, Kyle took the reins of sort of managing the project, but we had delays with sort of firmware during COVID times as well, resulting in these problems Kyle mentioned with the first version of the firmware. So yeah, that should be kind of made clear that there's kind of a lot behind.
Well, no research continues without hurdles that you have to jump
Right.
over. You've certainly had a few, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just maybe looking back over the project as a whole, and just thinking now about the challenges that remain and in this approach. Constructing a digital environment is all about trying to build best practices and drawing on demonstrators such as SENSUM. What do you think the learning points have been, and what are the challenges that you see going forward?
Mm-hmm.
Shall I take that one?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, absolutely. Okay.
Well, I think overall, I'm pretty happy with the approach we've taken and where we've ended up. I think we've probably taken a few wrong turns along the way. Certainly around how we package and deploy the sensors on different sites. There was a lot to learn about that. I think early on, we were sort of quick to kind of order gateways and additional equipment when perhaps we should have held off and specifically worked out what each site needed, and make sure it was actually practical to use that equipment on each of the sites. So perhaps we'd think about that again. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we've done is on the right track. There's not to say there aren't still challenges and improvements that we could make. I've mentioned some of the communication issues, and something that we might look at in future is how we can make that more robust and resilient. And that might mean moving away from the LoRaWAN protocol and looking at perhaps using a more kind of ad hoc LoRa protocol that we can make more resilient. Or perhaps some kind of hybrid between the two. But yeah, overall, I think it's going in the right direction anyway.
I guess I can just add on to that
yeah.
Just some things that have come back to my mind. Just the kind of, I think we're really proud of sort of the collaboration between the different parts of this project. There are lots of different users of this sensor, kind of different applications, and communication between sort of Kyle and Miles using these sensors in smart cobbles, Alessandro using the smart cobbles and the sensors in his laboratory experiments, has really been kind of key for brainstorming issues with these sensors, testing them in different environments and kind of learning from these different applications to kind of improve them together. And I think that's something quite special about the SENSUM project, having those kind of laboratory and field components sort of inform each other and eventually inform the sort of visualization of these hazards, communication of these risks, any kind of policy findings. We have, findings from the field being backed up by kind of findings from the lab and vice versa.
You mentioned early warning systems at the beginning. So that's
we've got some way to go for those.
Yeah.
We're definitely at the monitoring stage in terms of kind of having early warning. I mean, for example, some of the work that Alessandro is doing at the moment on these kind of static woody debris dams in the lab and showing, Irene could speak more about this, but showing kind of basically what the uncertainty is in just sort of a dam that's just sitting there in the flow, and how different flows can sort of result in kind of different behavior of the sensor, even if the dam's not necessarily being kind of moved or destabilized. Those are kind of important findings from the lab to understand what the uncertainties might be in the field data before we kind of jump on any kind of, data as showing some collapse of a dam. I don't know if Irene wants to jump in there more, but a lot of the work,
it's just yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's the as Georgie was saying, the combination between the laboratory experiment and the field experiment, as we can call them for now, because we are in the experimental phase, it was really fundamental for this. And I think that the experiment gave us also the capacity of the sensor to be able to capture like frequency that were not the natural frequency of the system, and also to capture when these to relate the movement with the type of movement, because sensors that were employed before, they only had the accelerometer, for example, and that gives you only one information, but having also the gyroscope and the magnetometer give you also the possibility to really have also the type of movement that is connected to the data. But again, having these from the lab, that you can really constrain the field, constrain the measurements and constrain the condition, then gives you the possibility to say, okay, so then the data that we have from the field, what we are looking at, so what we are really looking at. So it's really important, this connection, and yeah, that's, I think, the strength of the project, and also, you know, looking into the future, what could be developed even further with additional funding as well.
I think we clearly could carry on talking for the rest of the day on this fascinating topic, and I'm having a hard job keeping up with all the fantastic questions that are coming in the Q&A. So amongst the team, I hope people are answering some of these as you can, but maybe we've got time just for one last one from Abby Kibedi. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for the interesting discussion. What were the key considerations for deciding how many sensors should be used and the optimum spread of these for collecting sufficient spatial coverage for the particular areas that you study boulder movement in? So, for example, the cliff example shown in Georgie's presentation, especially the hazardous nature of those environments. Who'd like to take that one? How many sensors do you need to measure the environment?
I can take that one.
Yeah,
I mean, it was based on kind of careful geomorphological mapping and assessment of the site. For example, at Lyme Regis, it's kind of retrogressive failure back into the cliff with several kind of different terrace levels. We were interested in getting kind of a distribution of sensors across those different terraces. Also, just to look at the question of whether movement is sort of top down from weathering based introduction of material into the landslide, or sort of bottom up from sort of wave erosion of the cliff toe. That is kind of a question that we're getting at in terms of understanding the dynamics of these failures. I mean, original deployment on the Boulder project in Nepal, we were aiming to capture both the slow moving component of the landslide out there and a kind of debris flow channel to the margin of a landslide. Unfortunately, we weren't able to detect a debris flow. We were just able to detect slow moving movement of the landslide with just a few blocks. Luckily on SENSUM, we've had many more sensors, like up to about 20 per site. We kind of distributed the sensors in that way. So we play with those 20 to kind of get a good coverage of this landslide and the different sort of components that we think might be kind of interacting together to determine sort of the movement of that slide.
I suppose that the question that I have, which I see Matthew Wilkinson also asked, is when the battery runs out, how do you get them back? How do you know where they are? Because Kyle mentioned they were lithium batteries at one point, so just trying to sort of minimize the impact of these sensors. How do you retrieve them?
We go in dry times of the year where it's kind of safe to move about on the landslide. We can usually kind of find most of those blocks if they've kind of rolled down a little bit or been sort of moved in like a bit of a mud flow type thing. Some of them bright orange or something. They're painted on the top. Those slide cubes are painted bright yellow on the top. So yeah, Kyle, I don't know. We've kind of lost a few, haven't we, that just aren't found. I mean, the GPS component of the sensor has really not worked very well for our application. It works fine for wildlife tracking, but not for this application. We do have RFID sensors in sort of some of the blocks, certainly in the smart rivers, because they travel kind of quite a distance.
Yeah, all the blocks have RFID.
All the blocks have RFID, yeah. So we do have a kit that we can go and sort of survey, but most of them surprisingly seem to stay, even on these quite kind of clay-dominated landslides that get pretty wet. The sensors seem to sort of really surf on the surface. They don't get sucked into it. But yeah, I mean, it can be challenging to go and retrieve them. We then have a way of kind of melting out the resin just simply tugging out the sensor, replacing the battery, and then putting it back in, sometimes kind of on site, or we can take those away. They fit in a nice Sainsbury's kind of shopping bag. It's like you.
So if we see a Sainsbury's shopping bag on the slopes, we'll know what you're.
Right.
Folks, I'm just looking at the clock, and we could clearly carry on, but I think that's all we've really got time for today. And so I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you all very, very much. Dr. Georgie Bennett, Dr. Irene Manzella, Dr. Aldina Franco, and Dr. Kyle Roskilly. Thank you so much for your time today. That's been absolutely fascinating. And thank you very much to the audience as well. Glad we managed to ask at least some of the many questions that came in. And I haven't looked, but I hope some of the other ones were answered as we went along. So it's been a great discussion, I think, in just exploring these digital environment approaches. I think this is a great demonstrator project. We can really see how these approaches can be used to address real world problems. We will be making a video of this, recordings underway, and that will be available on our YouTube channel. So just to remind you, that's youtube.com/NERC Digital Environment, or just come onto the Constructing a Digital Environment website, and you'll find the thing there. So do come and have a look at the website as well, to the audience. Please do register for the next exciting event. We have a talk on the 13th of January. So we have a little break now for Christmas and the New Year, when we'll hear about the Pyramid project from Professor Haley Fowler and team at Newcastle, speaking about the platform for dynamic hyper-resolution near real-time flood risk assessment, integrating repurposed and novel data sources. So clearly the two projects should be working together. So we'll leave it there. All of you, thank you so much, and the recording will be available soon. So have a good rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you so much. Bye.